In 1853, the Winfield Scott broke on Anacapa. In 1869, the Golden Horn burned offshore. Velvet-lined trunks washed ashore, ledges blurred with seawater. On San Miguel, silver spoons turned up without owners. Which names never reached port, and who wrote the last entry in the logbook? A decanter clouded with salt, a vellum manifest, ink feathered, a chest half buried in kelp, brass gone green. From the 1840s to 1890s, over 2,000 vessels wrecked along California's coast. The Channel Islands kept cargo lists, but many pages ended mid-line. When the sea kept the cargo, what stories sank with it? Welcome to history's ledger. This is not the story of storms. It is the story of ledgers unfinished, trunks unopened, and luxuries drowned. The Pacific coast was one of the most dangerous routes of the 19th century. Ships carried gold seekers, settlers, porcelain, silver, silk, and wine towards San Francisco. Many never arrived. The Channel Islands became infamous for fog, reefs, and hidden shoals. Shipwrecks scattered cargo across beaches. Some recovered, some lost, some still buried in kelp. Tonight, we read what remains. A silver spoon with its monogram worn smooth, a crystal decanter clouded with salt, a chest half buried in sand. This is a calm telling, a history mystery, not solved but preserved. A bedtime history where wrecks are not only disasters, but silences written into the Pacific. In the middle of the 19th century, California's coast promised opportunity and ruin in equal measure. Ships leaving Panama or Mexico steered north towards San Francisco, their decks crowded with passengers drawn by gold or trade. Below, the holds carried the weight of futures, cases of French wine, imported porcelain, bolts of silk, iron machinery, tools, and trunks wrapped in velvet and brass. For many, this voyage was the final step toward a new beginning. But between Point Conception and the Golden Gate lay a stretch of water where thousands of vessels never arrived. The Channel Islands loomed low against the horizon, difficult to read from a distance and treacherous when fog descended. Captains used them as landmarks, but the same reefs that marked their presence could rip open a hull in seconds. Currents around Anacapa and Santa Cruz shifted unpredictably. A course that looked safe one moment could carry a vessel directly into shoal water the next. Some ships struck in broad daylight, others vanished entirely in storms no one on shore ever witnessed. The official records are blunt. Between the 1840s and 1890s, more than 2,000 wrecks occurred along this coastline. Cargo lists logged in San Francisco stop mid-entry. Insurance claims note entire consignments as missing, with no further explanation. Captains' journals sometimes close with routine weather observations, then nothing. The paper trail itself frays where the sea intervened. Historians call it archival silence. It is not only the absence of evidence, but the way the record halts abruptly, the way ink blurs where a page was touched by water, the way ledgers stop with a half-finished line. The fragments that survive feel more intimate than statistics. A manifest on vellum retrieved from a beach, its writing feathered into faint shadows, names impossible to read. A ledger stained by seawater, where whole columns of entries fade into smudges. Objects washed ashore tell their own version. A silver spoon wrapped in linen, its monogram softened away. A crystal decanter turned opaque by salt. A trunk half buried in kelp, its brass hinges corroded. Along the beaches of the islands, these fragments lay scattered. A candlestick dulled, but still recognizable in the sand. Porcelain shards lodged in tide pools, catching the light as waves moved across them. Timber beams stranded high on a shore, mute reminders of a ship erased just offshore. Each item was a trace, but never a full account. For families waiting in San Francisco, news arrived slowly, if at all. Notices pinned in shipping offices listed vessels overdue, some updated with the word wrecked, others crossed out when weeks turned to months. Letters were sent to shipping clerks asking for confirmation, but replies when they came were short. Missing, lost, presumed. Rarely did belongings accompany these words. The tragedy deepened because luxury sharpened the contrast. Velvet-lined trunks, packed with gowns, books, and family keepsakes, arrived swollen and locked, their contents ruined. Wine shipped from Bordeaux, logged carefully by merchants, turned up as unopened bottles floating near kelp beds. Silver candlesticks, engraved for families who never saw them again, appeared at auction, stripped of their origins. Each fragment that surfaced reminded survivors not only of what had been carried, but of the stories lost with those who did not return. The islands themselves became keepers of unfinished stories. Their reefs held iron fittings and brass fixtures. Their shores carried wreckage, and their archives, the ledgers and manifests meant to explain it all, remained incomplete. Why did some trunks wash ashore locked, their keys never recovered? Whose name stopped halfway down a manifest? Who wrote the final weather entry in a logbook that ended the day before a wreck? The sea never answered. It gave back fragments, but withheld closure. So the story of California's shipwrecks begins not with the storm or the reef, but with silence. The abrupt endings in the record, the objects returned without their owners, the pages that stop mid-line. In the Pacific ledger, absence became the story itself. Sailors dreaded the approach to Anacapa Island. Its cliffs rose abruptly from the water, but the danger wasn't what could be seen. It was what lay hidden just beneath the waves. A jagged ridge of rock reached out from the island like a set of dark teeth, waiting in silence. Mariners called it the Devil's Jaw. In 1853, the coastal steamer Winfield Scott attempted the passage north from Panama. She carried hundreds of passengers, most bound for San Francisco, some carrying fortunes made in the mines, Others families with little more than trunks, packed tight with clothing, books, and keepsakes. In her hold were crates of fine goods, European wine, imported glassware, manufactured items intended for the booming markets of California. The night was calm, but a heavy fog closed in. Landmarks disappeared. The crew took soundings, but each line cast gave back reassurance until the moment the ship struck. The impact echoed through the hull, wood splintering, metal groaning. Within minutes, it was clear she would not be saved. Passengers reached shore in small boats and waited on Anacapa, marooned for several days. They survived, but their possessions did not. Cargo that could have stocked warehouses or furnished homes slipped into deep water. Some items drifted back to land, a trunk swollen shut, its brass corroded beyond use. Fragments of porcelain scattered in tide pools, glass bottles coated in salt haze. But much was gone forever. Records kept in San Francisco show the Scots' consignment only in fragments. Cargo lists cut off mid-page, ink streaked by moisture. Some lines are legible, but others dissolve into blurred marks. It's a pattern seen across many wrecks of the coast. Pages that begin with order, then collapse into silence. For those stranded on the island, the wait for rescue was marked not by violence, but by emptiness. A survivor later recalled that the hardest part was hearing the wreck break apart, piece by piece just offshore. Each sound, a reminder of what was being lost. No one could stop it. Each crack carried away wealth, names, stories. The reef itself remains a kind of archive. Divers still find pieces wedged between its crevices, iron fittings covered in growth, shards of decorated pottery, the curved edge of a spoon. Each artifact confirms the wreck, but none restores the story of the people who once used them. What makes the Winfield Scott remarkable is not that lives were saved, but that so much else was erased. Survivors reached San Francisco, but the objects that defined their passage were gone. Families were reunited, yet trunks arrived ruined, or not at all. Ledgers exist, but their final entries dissolve just before they can explain. Why do the written records break the same way the ship did, complete until the moment they stop? Was the tally interrupted as the hull struck? Did salt air claim the pages after they were carried ashore? Or did clerks simply abandon their task when nothing could be recovered? The Devil's Jaw gained its reputation here. The reef did not need storm or violence to prove deadly. A ship sailed in with order, cargo lists neat, passengers secure. It sailed out in fragments, ledgers unfinished, and belongings never claimed. The reef kept its name, and the sea kept the story unfinished. In the autumn of 1869, the clipper ship Golden Horn caught fire off the coast of Santa Cruz Island. She had been built for speed, sleek lines meant for the China trade, but fire moved faster than canvas or current. The blaze rose suddenly, spreading from hold to deck, and within hours the vessel was beyond saving. Witnesses described the glow on the horizon, a column of smoke rising into night, sparks carried by the wind. For those aboard, survival meant abandoning everything. Boats were lowered, men and women climbing down as timbers cracked and rigging burned overhead. The ship's log stopped abruptly that day. Its final lines record nothing unusual, then break. Another entry never came. In San Francisco, the insurance records for Golden Horn survive, but even there, silence spreads. The cargo was listed as trunks, cases, casks. No detail follows, just numbers, and then a line left blank. Later, wreckage washed ashore. Locals who searched the beaches found scattered remnants, blackened wood, glass melted into strange shapes, cloth fused into brittle lumps. The most haunting discoveries came weeks later. Several trunks turned up, swollen shut, their brass fittings green with corrosion. They were still locked. The keys had been lost in the fire or the sea. One account recalls a fisherman standing over one of the trunks, touching the ruined brass. He murmured, almost to himself, "Someone meant to open this in San Francisco." Then he stepped back and let it lie. The trunks were taken inland, catalogued, but never opened. Their owners' names had been erased with the ship's manifest. Families waited in San Francisco for belongings that never arrived, or arrived sealed and unrecognizable. The silence of those trunks matched the silence in the ledgers. Luxury was buried in that silence. The Golden Horn had been carrying fine goods for the California market: French wine, Asian porcelain, household wares, textiles. A few objects were recovered: a porcelain cup fractured by heat, a decanter clouded with salt, a silver spoon darkened by fire. Each was displayed briefly as salvage, then passed quietly into collections. None could be traced to a name. The reef off Santa Cruz kept other secrets. Divers later reported pieces of iron hull, scorched timbers, and glass fused into stone. The wreck itself is still there, broken and scattered, like the record that was meant to explain it. The fire left no survivors unaccounted for, but it left the same unanswered question as other wrecks. Why do the objects survive when the names do not? Why do the ledgers stop at the moment they are needed most? The Golden Horn reminds us that silence doesn't always come from storm or reef. Sometimes it comes from fire, from paper curling into ash, from keys lost when they were most needed. And the trunks remain a mystery still. Objects sealed against time, stories locked within, their owners erased from the record. In the 1930s, a storm cut into the dunes of San Miguel Island and revealed something unexpected. Lodged in the sand was a weathered wooden chest, its planks swollen, its iron fittings streaked green. The box had been sealed for decades, maybe longer. Inside, carefully wrapped in linen that had yellowed and stiffened with time, lay a set of silver spoons. Each piece was polished once, engraved faintly, but now dulled by the sea air. No one knew who had packed them. The find puzzled the locals who uncovered it. San Miguel had seen its share of wrecks: clippers driven onto shoals, schooners burned or scattered by storms. Manifests from the period listed cargoes of household goods, cutlery, and furnishings meant for San Francisco. Yet none mentioned a chest of spoons wrapped with such care. The spoons themselves raised questions. They bore no legible initials, the monograms worn thin. The linen still carried folds, as if hands had placed them carefully one by one, with the expectation that they would be used again. One farmer who handled the chest is said to have whispered, "They packed these for a table that was never set." The objects were removed, catalogued briefly, then stored. The owner's name was never discovered. Insurance claims from the late 19th century list silver service several times, but always without detail. Which claim, if any, matched the San Miguel chest remains uncertain. The silence of the archive matched the silence of the beach. Cargo ledgers from ships lost nearby trail off mid-page, some ending with assorted goods or household wares, nothing more. The spoons could belong to any one of them, or none at all. Luxury gives the absence weight. Silver cutlery was not common on immigrant vessels or coastal packets. These were items chosen for permanence, for continuity of family life in a new city. They were symbols of stability, meant to survive the voyage intact. Finding them wrapped and abandoned suggests not only loss of property, but loss of identity. Objects remained, the people did not. The chest on San Miguel has never been tied to a single wreck. It might have come from a vessel that struck reefs off Santa Rosa, or one that burned offshore and drifted north. Or it could have been carried ashore by currents, deposited far from the site of the disaster. What lingers is the quiet strangeness of it, a chest preserved in sand, its contents intact, its story erased. Who wrapped the spoons? Why were they packed so carefully? Whose table in San Francisco was meant to hold them? The archive does not answer. The beach does not answer. The spoons remain, but the names have gone. For every shipwreck off the Channel Islands, there should have been a paper trail. Cargo lists, captain's journals, crew rosters, insurance claims. Each voyage began in neat handwriting, but when the sea intervened, the records often stopped where they were needed most. Archivists in San Francisco have pulled manifests from the 1850s and 1860s that look complete until the final page. A column begins with goods clearly listed: trunks, barrels, crates, casks. Then the ink dissolves, the line unfinished. A clerk never returned to complete it. Sometimes the damage is physical, water staining the bottom half of the page, ink feathered into blurs. Sometimes it is human. The voyage never concluded, so no one had reason or ability to write again. Captain's logs show the same collapse. Routine entries fill page after page. Latitude, wind direction, remarks on speed. Then a final date, followed by nothing. No record of grounding, no mention of fire or collision, only silence. The men who might have written those words were themselves at sea, abandoning ship or clinging to small boats. The pen lay still while the wreck wrote its own ending offshore. One surviving ledger from a coastal freighter lists textiles and wine, the handwriting steady. The last entry begins with cases of porcelain, but the line ends abruptly, as though the page itself broke off. The rest of the sentence was carried by waves rather than ink. Occasionally, fragments of these documents washed ashore, a sheet of vellum stiffened by salt, a logbook swollen so that its pages fused together, a half-torn cargo note, initials smudged away. People who found them might dry them by a hearth, but the words were already gone. One fisherman on Santa Rosa Island held a warped manifest and muttered, "It ends the same way the ship did." Then he folded it back into the wreckage. Luxury made the loss sharper. The unfinished lines point to objects we know were carried but never claimed. Silver services noted only as assorted plate. Wine casks described as French vintage. Gowns reduced to articles of dress. None of these words are enough to tell us whose hands packed them, whose families awaited them. The pages provide outlines without detail, silhouettes of lives erased mid-voyage. The grief in these silences is subtle but heavy. A name that might have been written beside a trunk of books is gone. A spoon meant to carry a monogram appears only as cutlery. Whole families listed as passengers vanish without individual record. The ledgers flatten stories, just as the sea scattered belongings. Why do the pages stop this way? Did clerks abandon their tasks once they knew the goods were lost? Did damp ink dissolve before anyone read it? Or did someone once complete the line, only for fire or seawater to erase it afterward? Whatever the cause, the pattern is clear. The archives of California's shipwrecks hold more blanks than words. Each blank is itself a record, proof not only of what was lost at sea, but of how memory failed on land. Every missing line is a reminder. Behind every trunk swollen shut, behind every decanter clouded with salt, behind every chest buried in kelp. There was once a page meant to explain it. The page stopped. The sea kept the rest. The story of a shipwreck does not end on the reef. It continues in the homes of those who waited for vessels that never arrived. In San Francisco, the harbor notices listed incoming ships in careful columns. Dates of departure, expected arrivals, and lines of cargo were chalked or printed, meant to reassure merchants and families alike. But when weeks passed with no sign of a vessel, the notes changed. First came the word overdue. Later, a clerk would cross it out and replace it with missing. Some notices stopped there. Others added the blunt phrase, presumed lost. For those waiting, the silence was unbearable. Letters were sent to shipping officers asking for news. Replies came slowly, often written in a hand so detached it felt cruel. No record, no cargo received. A wife holding such a letter knew she would never see the trunk her husband had packed, or the spoons engraved with their family crest. She was left not with belongings, but with a gap where his name should have been in the ledger. Merchants suffered too. Cargo promised to stock shelves never arrived. Insurance might cover part of the loss, but not all. Some shop owners collapsed under the weight of vanished shipments. Regret hardened into debt, and debt into ruin. A man who had waited for French wine and porcelain to sell in his store now faced empty shelves and creditors. The emotional collapse was not written in ledgers, but in lives. Families gathered at docks when word of a wreck spread, hoping at least for survivors or belongings. Some were handed a single item, a candlestick, a spoon, a comb found in kelp. Others received nothing. The absence itself became the message. One account recalls a mother watching crates unloaded from a rescue ship, hoping to see her daughter's belongings. Instead, she was told there were none. She is said to have whispered, almost to herself, "Then she has nothing left of her." The grief of these families sharpened the meaning of the objects that did survive. A velvet-lined trunk, delivered swollen, shut, its contents fused together, could bring as much sorrow as comfort. A book swollen by salt reminded its owner not of continuity, but of everything that had been erased. What lingers in the record is not what was recovered, but what was missing. Whole households vanished from the shipping lists, entire inventories lost to silence. Each absence a wound that time could not close because no explanation was ever written down. The families of San Francisco carried that silence. They bore it in unpaid debts, in rooms left unfurnished, in tables without the silver or porcelain meant for them. They bore it in the empty space beside them at night, knowing the ship that carried their loved ones had ended its story before reaching port. This is the part of the ledger that can never be balanced. Numbers can be tallied, cargo can be valued, but grief cannot be accounted for. And regret cannot be erased when all that is left are notices crossed out with the word lost. The collapse of families was quieter than the crash of ships, but just as final. Among the fragments left by California's wrecks, few are more haunting than the logbooks. These were meant to be daily accounts of a voyage, latitude and longitude, wind and current, notes on cargo, comments on discipline or health. They were the captain's assurance that order existed at sea. Yet in case after case, the final pages end abruptly, sometimes mid-sentence. One journal from a schooner bound north lists routine weather observations for several days in November. Clear skies, moderate winds, all as expected. The final line begins, soundings taken at dawn, and then nothing. The rest of the page is blank. No explanation for why the ship never arrived in San Francisco. Weeks later, debris was spotted off Santa Rosa. The record itself had collapsed before the vessel did. Why do these silences feel so heavy? Perhaps because they deny us the drama we expect. No description of waves crashing, no cry of fire or reef, just ordinary words that stop. The logbook closes in calm, while the ship it belonged to ended in chaos. Some captains wrote more. The master of a coastal steamer noted fog thickening one evening near Anacapa. He wrote of speed reduced, leadsmen posted, the bell tolling at intervals. His final sentence begins with, "We proceed cautiously." then trails into a smear of ink as if the page was snatched away. Hours later, his vessel struck the rocks. Survivors brought fragments of the book ashore, but the words after that unfinished line were gone. It raises questions we can't answer. Did the captain try to continue writing as the hull gave way? Did the ink blur when water washed across the desk? Or did someone stop mid-thought because there was no longer time to write? Occasionally, the books themselves survived in stranger forms. A log retrieved from Santa Cruz Island was swollen until its covers bowed outward. The paper inside had fused into a solid block, impossible to separate. What it once recorded is permanently sealed. The object remains, but the story inside is mute. The silence of these entries tells us something about the final moments of Rex. It suggests how quickly order turned to collapse. Ships maintain their rituals, soundings, log entries, charts, right until the instant they were lost. Then, the ritual stopped, not with ceremony, but with absence. Even the handwriting becomes a kind of testimony. Strong, practiced letters fade into uncertain strokes or end halfway across the page. One survivor remembered seeing his captain with pen still in hand as the ship struck. "He meant to finish," the sailor said softly, "but the sea finished first." Logbooks are supposed to preserve memory. Here, they preserve only the outline of memory's failure. We know where a sentence began, but not where it was meant to end. What more could these books have told us? Which names were left unwritten? Which warnings never recorded? Did a captain intend to describe the reef that destroyed him, or to write nothing at all once he realized it was too late? In the end, the last entries remind us that silence is itself a record. When the ink stops flowing, that absence becomes the final line. When storms or reefs broke a ship apart, what washed back was rarely intact. Cargo meant for San Francisco's markets or homes arrived in fragments, its purpose erased. Trunks were the most common survivors. They floated, bobbing in kelp beds, then broke open on the rocks. Some were swollen shut, their wood warped and their brass gone green. Inside, cloth fused into a single mass, books clumped into blocks of pulp, letters blurred into stains. A velvet lining, once chosen for elegance, became a damp sponge holding nothing but silence. Who had packed these trunks? Whose names were pressed into the paper of their manifests before the ink ran? Porcelain also drifted back. Imported dishes from Asia, shipped in crates, shattered into tide pools. The shards still caught sunlight, glimmering faintly as waves rolled over them. Some fragments were gathered and catalogued, others lay scattered in sand, slowly worn smooth until no one could tell if they had belonged to one family or another. Silver appeared in stranger ways. Spoons wrapped in linen turned up with monograms softened by salt. Candlesticks were found at auctions in San Francisco, stripped of origin, sold without record of which ship had carried them. Were they salvage claimed quietly, or objects recovered by those who preferred not to answer questions? The archives don't say. A few items carried mystery that lingers. Fishermen, on Anacarpa recalled trunks washed onto shore, still locked, their keys never recovered. They lifted them, tested the weight, but never broke them open. What lay inside remains unknown. Could it have been nothing more than ruined cloth? Or did one of those trunks hold a logbook, a ledger, a family's letters that would have explained what the sea erased? Crystal decanters surfaced too. Some were cracked and dulled, others clouded as if the ocean had breathed into them. They reflected light strangely, like ghosts of objects once meant to hold celebration. Who had chosen them? Whose table had they been intended for? Mystery is tied to these fragments because they outlast their context. A spoon is only an object, but in the absence of its owner's name, it becomes a question. A chest is only wood, but when it sits sealed on a beach with no record of who packed it, it becomes a story waiting but never told. Luxury deep in the grief of loss. Silk gowns packed with care arrived as sodden tangles. Books bound in leather swelled until their spines burst. Jewelry was sometimes found in kelp beds, but stones had slipped their settings. Each object carried the weight of permanence in its design, but impermanence in its fate. Why did some objects return and others vanish? Why did certain trunks float ashore, sealed but unopened, while others dissolved into the surf? Did the sea keep the more valuable items for itself? Or were they claimed quietly by those who found them, never recorded in ledgers at all? The cargo of California's shipwrecks survives in fragments. Each piece is a reminder of lives interrupted, stories that reach the coast but never the port. And every object, from spoon to candlestick to decanter, leaves its question open. Not every fragment from California's wrecks stayed on the islands. Some drifted into markets and auction houses in San Francisco, where they were displayed as salvage, stripped of context, sold to the highest bidder. Notices in newspapers from the 1860s and 1870s mention shipwreck goods. The descriptions were deliberately vague: assorted plate, household wares, casks of wine. No ship name, no owner's initials. Buyers arrived curious, some chasing bargains, others drawn by the romance of wrecks. Few asked questions. Among these lots were unmistakable luxuries. Silver candlesticks hammered with family crests were sold without mention of the families. Crystal decanters, cloudy from exposure to salt air, stood on tables until the auctioneer's gavel fell. Textiles folded stiff with water damage were catalogued simply as articles of dress. The objects told their own stories, but no one recorded them. Who packed the candlesticks? Which family had chosen those gowns? Which merchant had ordered the French wine now open to bidders who never saw the coast where it was lost? The archives keep silence. One account recalls a woman attending such a sale, lifting a spoon from a box. The monogram had faded, but the faint outline of initials could still be traced. She turned it in her hand, then whispered, "Someone waited for this to return." She set it down again. The spoon was sold minutes later to another buyer. Mystery deepens in the trail these objects leave. Some pieces reappeared decades later in private collections. A porcelain bowl, cracked through the center, sat on a mantel in San Francisco, identified only as from a wreck near Santa Cruz. A mirror, its silver backing blackened, was displayed in a shop window, no provenance attached. The absence of names is its own kind of silence. Auction ledgers list prices, but not owners. Insurance records note claims, but not resolutions. Families waiting in the city may have never known their belongings had been sold. Luxury sharpens the regret. These were not crates of nails or barrels of grain. They were objects of continuity. Cutlery for family tables, crystal for celebrations, gowns meant to mark weddings or arrivals. To see them reduced to lots in a crowded hall was to see permanence broken down into commerce. Why did some salvage find its way to auction, while other items vanished completely? Were certain goods claimed quietly by salvors before authorities intervened? Did auctioneers themselves choose to conceal origins to protect reputations? The answers are buried in ledgers that list only numbers. Every candlestick, every decanter, every spoon sold without a name carried with it a story never told. The buyers gained possession, but not memory. The auctions ended with the sound of a gavel. The sea's silence continued. When paper records dissolved and auction ledgers stopped short, the islands themselves kept the account. Each beach, reef, and cliffside became a page in a different kind of book, one written not in ink, but in wreckage. Walk the sand of Santa Cruz after a storm, and you might find porcelain shards dulled by years of tide, their blue patterns faint but still visible. On Anacapa, tide pools catch fragments of crystal glass, their surfaces cloudy but refracting light in strange colors. On San Miguel, a brass fitting half buried in kelp tells of a trunk swollen shut long ago. The islands keep these fragments in no particular order. A spoon with initials worn away lies beside stones that have seen centuries. A candlestick appears where no house ever stood. Timber beams rest on beaches far from where the ship struck. The islands make no attempt to arrange them. They simply hold what the sea decides to return. To divers, the reefs are their own archive. Iron ribs of hulls coated in growth, portholes encrusted with shell. A collapsed boiler from a coastal steamer sits in silence, its function long gone, its presence undeniable. Fish weave through broken cabins. Logs that should have been written ashore are replaced by this mute evidence. The islands also hold silence in more unsettling forms. Bones have been found on beaches, sometimes human, sometimes animal, weathered until they no longer carry identity. No ledger ties them to a name. No record explains their journey. They rest in the same sand as silver spoons and porcelain shards, part of the same unfinished story. Luxury deepens the mystery. A velvet trunk swollen with seawater is not just cargo. It is continuity interrupted. A gown, ruined by dam, folded still within, raises questions about who once wore it. A decanter clouded with salt speaks of celebrations planned but never held. Each fragment is both evidence and question, proof and absence. Why do the islands return some objects but keep others? Why are certain trunks sealed and intact, while others dissolve into fragments before reaching shore? Why do ledges on land end mid-line, only for the islands to provide evidence without explanation? The Channel Islands are a ledger without names. They record what the archives erased, but they do not interpret. They remind us that memory is not only written on paper, it can also be scattered on beaches, hidden in reefs, and buried in kelp. And in that way, the islands themselves become part of the mystery, not just witnesses to wrecks, but keepers of unfinished stories. So, what do you think? Do the islands hold the answers still, waiting in sand and surf? Or are they only fragments, destined to remain incomplete? Share your thoughts below. I read everyone. Like this video if the silence of the islands lingered with you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of history's ledger, where we keep turning pages of the past that refuse to close. By the mid-19th century, steam promised to change everything. No longer dependent on fickle winds, ships could keep schedules measured in days rather than months. Passengers paid for reliability, merchants paid for speed, and captains carried the weight of those expectations every time they left port. The California coast became a proving ground for this new era. Steamers left Panama crowded with gold seekers returning north, settlers chasing futures, and families bound for San Francisco. Their cabins were stacked with trunks, their holds with crates of luxury. Velvet-lined boxes carried jewelry. Silk gowns were folded carefully in paper. Cases of French wine and fine china were loaded beside barrels of flour. Crystal decanters clinked in straw-filled compartments. Steam was not only faster, it carried more refinement, more ambition, and more risk. But speed created its own dangers. To meet the timetables expected in San Francisco, captains often pressed forward in fog rather than waiting. An extra day at sea could mean profit lost, investors dissatisfied, passengers angry. So the ships pushed harder, hugging coasts that were barely charted, trusting numbers written in ledgers that sometimes failed them. The Channel Islands stood directly in their path. Anacarpa's reefs, Santa Cruz's hidden coves, Santa Rosa's shifting bars. Each was a hazard magnified by steam's urgency. A clipper under sail might tack away when fog grew too thick. A steamer, with passengers demanding arrival on time, pressed forward. Many reached the city safely, others ended in silence. The ledgers of this era are filled with the contradictions of progress. Cargo manifest list, cases of porcelain or assorted plate, lines written with confidence. Then pages end abruptly when the vessel never arrived. Families in San Francisco waited at the docks, their names recorded in passenger lists, but often struck through later with the word missing. Luxury objects from these steamers sharpen the mystery. Porcelain cups, fractured by heat, spoons dulled by salt, trunks recovered swollen shut, their brass corroded. They remind us that progress carried fragility too. A gown meant for a wedding dissolved in seawater before its owner ever reached shore. A ledger meant to balance trade blurred into stains before a clerk could finish the line. What did progress cost when it arrived too quickly? Why did the very engines meant to guarantee safety push vessels closer to risk? Did passengers realize that their demand for speed put them in greater danger? Or did they trust that steam alone could outpace the hazards of the Pacific? This golden era was bright, but it cast shadows. The very pressure that made California's steamships celebrated also made them vulnerable. The wrecks that litter the Channel Islands are not only stories of storms, they are stories of decisions, captains pushing forward, ledgers written too confidently, passengers carrying luxuries never meant to return as fragments. The sea gave California its prosperity, but it demanded payment in silence. And the islands recorded that debt in their own way, in spoons found in mud, in candlesticks sold without names, in ledgers that stopped mid-line. For all the dangers of reefs and storms, nothing terrified passengers more than fire. A ship could survive wind, or even grounding if luck allowed. But once flame reached the timbers or the cargo hold, there was little hope. At sea, fire spread faster than any wave. Steamships made the threat worse. Their engines burned coal by the ton, sparks rising from funnels, settling on canvas or deck. Holds carried goods that ignited easily. Lamp oil, varnished furniture, crates of spirits. A single accident could transform a voyage into ruin. The Golden Horn in 1869 is one of the best remembered examples. Bound for San Francisco, she caught fire off Santa Cruz Island. Witnesses on shore saw her glow on the horizon, a bright smear against the night. Passengers were forced into boats as flames spread across the rigging. The ship burned until only her frame remained, then collapsed into the sea. Survivors reached land, but their belongings did not. Wreckage drifted ashore for weeks, blackened beams, melted glass, cloth fused into brittle lumps. Later, trunks were recovered. Some were still locked, brass fittings turned green, wood swollen shut. The keys had vanished with the fire. Imagine the weight of those trunks lifted onto the sand. No one dared force them open. Officials catalogued them, recorded nothing more than unclaimed. Who had packed them? What was inside? Was it ruined cloth or letters that could have explained the story? The mystery stayed sealed with the wood. Luxury deepened the loss. The Golden Horn was said to have carried cases of fine porcelain and wine for San Francisco's merchants. What survived were shards in tide pools, bottles coated with salt, silverware darkened by heat. Objects meant for permanence, reduced to fragments. Why do so many trunks appear locked, their keys never found? Were the owners carrying them when they abandoned ship, dropping them in panic? Did the sea keep the keys while surrendering only the shells? And why do the ledgers for the Golden Horn end in generalities, cases, trunks, wares, instead of specific names? Was it because the records themselves burned, or because the clerks never received enough information to finish? Other ships met similar fates. Fires erupted in holds, sometimes from spontaneous combustion in coal bunkers, sometimes from lamps overturned in storms. In each case, records vanish. Logbooks curl into ash. Manifests dissolve in water, used to fight flames. Families in San Francisco received notices stripped of detail, destroyed by fire, nothing saved. Yet fragments still surfaced. A porcelain cup with its glaze cracked but intact. A spoon bent by heat but still recognizable. A candlestick carried to auction. No one certain which vessel had once borne it. The mystery of fire at sea is not only how ships burned, but why the silence afterward is so complete. Why do ledgers stop before they tell us what was lost? Why do trunks remain locked, never opened, their contents guessed at but never seen? Each wreck leaves its questions sealed as tightly as those trunks. And fire, more than reef or storm, ensures that some questions will never be answered. The Channel Islands hold more than wreckage. They hold the traces of lives that ended within sight of shore. For every ship that struck reef or burned at sea, there were passengers and crew who never made it back to the mainland. Some reached the beaches, only to die there in the days that followed. Others were lost to currents, carried beyond recovery. The islands became graveyards without markers, where silence weighs heavier than stone. On Santa Rosa Island, bones have been uncovered in sand dunes, pale and brittle, mingled with driftwood and seaweed. Some belong to animals, others to people. No names accompany them, no records explain who they were. A corroded buckle found nearby suggests a passenger. A fragment of cloth hardened by salt hints at a uniform. But no ledger connects artifact to body. On Anacapa, fishermen once spoke of finding remains after storms, washed into tide pools beside porcelain shards. A spoon lay half buried near one discovery, initials almost erased. Whose table had it belonged to? Was it carried by the same hand now reduced to bone? The question remains unanswered. The silence of these graves is deepened by the absence of ritual. In San Francisco, families buried empty coffins, names carved in stone, for bodies never returned. On the islands, the dead lay without ceremony. No prayers, no monuments, no markers. Only sand shifting, waves striking, gulls circling overhead. Luxury sharpens the contrast. Silver spoons dulled by salt. Candlesticks sold at auction with no provenance. Velvet trunks swollen shut. These fragments endure, polished by collectors or stored in museums, while the people who once used them rest in unmarked earth. Objects become evidence while the individuals vanish. It is tempting to imagine stories behind each discovery. A sailor clutching a logbook that never reached shore. A woman carrying a child's trunk, its brass hinges now corroded. A family waiting in San Francisco, told only missing when they asked for word. But the archives do not give these stories. They stop mid-line, leaving silence where memory should have been. One island rancher, after uncovering bones in the 1920s, is said to have whispered, "The sea buried them better than we could." He recovered the remains with sand. No marker was placed. The mystery grows from that silence. How many lives ended on those shores? How many graves lie hidden beneath dunes or buried under kelp beds? How many bones have already been washed away, erased before anyone could record them? The islands are graveyards without stones. They keep fragments, bones without names, spoons without owners, ledgers without endings. And in each silence, the ledger of California's wrecks remains unfinished. When a ship struck reef or burned offshore, the first to reach the wreck were not always rescuers. They were often salvagers, fishermen, ranchers, or opportunists who lived near the Channel Islands. To them, wreckage was not only debris, it was material, cargo, sometimes even treasure. Heat often drove these searches. Wreckage washed ashore after storms in summer, when the sun bore down on the beaches and the men searching squinted through glare. Dust kicked up from dunes as they hauled timbers or trunks across sand. The work was not romantic. It was labor, performed in sweat and silence. Some finds were ordinary: casks of flour hardened to stone, barrels of salt meat already spoiled. Others carried value. Ranchers told of candlesticks lifted from tide pools, decanters dulled by seawater, crates of porcelain reduced to shards. These objects were hauled inland, some catalogued, others sold quietly. The smell of iron was everywhere: broken nails, corroded fittings, the rust of anchors drying on shore. Salvagers handled these alongside luxuries, the scent of decay clinging to their hands even as they polished silver. And sometimes, salvage brought unease. Bones appeared among the wreckage. On Santa Cruz, a scavenger uncovered a skeleton near the remains of a boat. He noticed a buckle near the ribs, faintly gleaming under sand. The sight was enough to stop him. He left both where they lay. Silence hung heavy over these discoveries. Salvagers did not always report what they found. Manifests from San Francisco often ended mid-line, listing cargo that never appeared in official recovery. Where did those missing goods go? Were they claimed quietly, stored in island homes, or melted into auctions without provenance? The records remain blank. Luxury heightened the questions. A velvet trunk swollen shut was taken to a ranch house and left unopened for years. A mirror, its backing blackened, was displayed on a wall without any name attached to it. Silver spoons wrapped in linen were found on San Miguel, never traced to their owners. Each of these was salvaged, but the story behind them remained at sea. Why were some items carefully catalogued while others vanished into private hands? Did salvagers conceal them to avoid disputes, or did officials choose not to ask questions? How many objects in San Francisco homes came not from shops, but from beaches that served as ledgers of loss? The Channel Islands became both graveyards and markets. Salvage blurred the line between preservation and disappearance. Objects were saved, but their names were erased. The heat of the sun on the beach, the dust rising from dunes, the smell of iron clinging to broken fittings, the silence after each discovery, and the sight of bones mingled with spoons. All of these remind us that wrecks were not only disasters offshore, they were recoveries on land, recoveries that often left as many mysteries as they solved. The islands gave back fragments. What people did with them is a ledger of its own, one that remains unfinished. Every wreck along California's coast left behind not only debris, but silence. The silence was heavier than the trunks, heavier than the iron scattered on reefs. It accumulated in ledgers unfinished, in logbooks that ended mid-line, in objects stripped of their owners' names. Clerks in San Francisco offices tried to keep order. They listed arrivals, tallied cargo, filed claims. But when a ship never reached port, the pages turned strange. Some manifests ended with words blurred by damp. Others showed long gaps, as if the pen had hesitated and never returned. Whole families were reduced to the word missing. Merchants' losses were described as assorted goods, nothing more. That absence is what historians call archival silence. But to those who lived through it was grief, written in ink, that stopped too soon. Luxury objects gave that grief its sharpest edge. Velvet trunks swollen shut, retrieved intact but unopened. Silver spoons wrapped in linen, initials worn smooth, found on a beach with no names attached. Crystal decanters clouded by salt, washed into tide pools, evidence of celebrations that never came. Porcelain cups fractured by impact, their patterns faded but recognizable. Each fragment was a reminder that what endured were things, not people. The silence reached into homes as well. Families waiting in San Francisco might receive a notice, then nothing further. A wife read a single line, shipwrecked near the islands, followed by weeks of unanswered letters. A father scanned insurance bulletins, hoping to find his son's belongings listed among recovered goods. Instead, he found blank entries and crossed out lines. Even survivors carried silence. Some men rescued from wrecks refused to speak of what they had seen, leaving the details buried with the wreckage itself. Their accounts in newspapers are clipped, careful, as if too much honesty would only reopen wounds. The weight of silence grows with each wreck. 2,000 vessels, thousands of families, countless objects left without context. Imagine the sheer mass of ledgers that stop midway, the cargo lists that never conclude. Imagine the piles of trunks stored in warehouses, never claimed, each one sealed like a story never told. Why do these silences linger louder than the words that remain? Perhaps because we expect records to explain, and when they do not, the absence feels louder than any explanation could. Perhaps because the fragments we hold, a spoon, a candlestick, a page blurred into smudge, suggest so much more than they reveal. The islands kept these fragments. The archives kept the silence. Together they form a ledger that is still unfinished, a book where every page ends before it should. The heaviest cargo of the Pacific was not porcelain or silver or trunks lined with velvet. It was silence itself, and silence, unlike goods, could not be salvaged. Some wrecks along the Channel Islands became famous, their names passed down in stories and salvage records. Yet even the best remembered remain incomplete, known more for fragments than for full accounts. The Winfield Scott struck Anacapa in 1853. Passengers survived, camping on the island until help arrived. Their trunks and cargo did not. A few items washed back, porcelain shards lodged in tide pools, a trunk swollen shut with brass turned green, scattered fittings from the hull. In San Francisco, merchants scanned ledgers hoping for compensation, but the cargo list for the Scott ends halfway down the page. The line for cases of porcelain dissolves into blurred ink. To this day, divers recover fragments from the wreck, but not the names tied to them. The Golden Horn burned in 1869. Survivors rode away under a sky lit by fire. Trunks drifted later to shore, still locked, their keys gone. A fisherman who handled one is said to have whispered, "Someone meant this for San Francisco." He let it lie. The trunks were catalogued without detail, the owners never identified. In auction houses later, candlesticks and spoons appeared, but no provenance, no family name, no claim. Other wrecks were less recorded, but no less haunting. A schooner near Santa Rosa left behind only a candlestick dulled by sand and bones found decades later in shifting dunes. The logbook ended mid-sentence. A coastal freighter struck off Santa Cruz, its ledgers surviving long enough to be filed, but the final lines are unfinished, words trailing into water stains. Each wreck is remembered not for what we know, but for what we cannot finish. Luxury deepens that memory, the decanter clouded with salt, the ivory comb cracked in half, the velvet-lined trunk swollen beyond opening. These objects are remembered because they survived, yet the people who carried them and the stories behind them remain silent. What is remembrance when it comes through fragments? Does finding a spoon in the sand restore the life of its owner, or only remind us that we no longer know who they were? Does cataloguing shards of porcelain give us history, or just confirm the depth of loss? Mystery lingers in every remembered wreck. Why did the Winfield Scott's cargo vanish while its passengers lived? Why did the Golden Horn's trunks remain locked, their keys never found? How many unnamed ships struck reefs, their stories erased before they reached paper? The Channel Islands hold these wrecks like unfinished entries. Each name remembered in history books is tied not to a complete narrative, but to a ledger that stops before it can close. Remembrance here is not clarity, it is fragments, unanswered questions, and silence that grows heavier with each attempt to explain it. Today, much of what survives from California's wrecks rests behind glass. Museums display fragments of the past as if they are complete stories. Yet most of these objects tell only part of what was lost. On shelves in collections are porcelain shards, their patterns faint but still recognizable. Some carry delicate blue florals, others the faint outlines of birds. Visitors admire the fragments, yet none of the labels can name who once lifted these cups to their lips. The porcelain is recorded, but the people are absent. Nearby, silver spoons lie in drawers, tarnished, their surfaces dulled by salt. A few still bear worn initials, but the letters are too faint to confirm. Which family packed them? Which ship carried them north? The records give no answer. Crystal decanters, clouded by the sea, catch museum lights but no longer shine. Their corks are gone, their clarity replaced by haze. They speak of celebrations that never came, voyages meant for joy that ended in silence. Trunks, when they survive, are often swollen shut, their wood warped, their fittings green with corrosion. Some were brought into collections unopened. Conservators debate whether to force them open, knowing that whatever lies inside may already be ruined beyond recognition. What stories wait inside? Ledgers blurred into pulp, letters dissolved into stains, clothing stiffened into unrecognizable clumps. The questions linger with every closed lid. One museum on the California coast displays a candlestick retrieved from a wreck near Santa Rosa. Its shape is elegant, but its surface is roughened by years in sand. The label lists unknown ship, circa 1860s. That absence of provenance turns the candlestick into a mystery rather than an answer. Whose home was it meant for? Was it carried for a merchant sale or as a family heirloom? Even in collections, silence persists. Insurance ledgers filed in San Francisco sometimes mention silver services, crates of porcelain, or crystal sets, but they do not link to the objects now behind glass. The connection between paper and artifact has dissolved. A curator once said quietly to a visitor, "The sea is the real author here. We only keep the fragments." His words capture the truth of these displays. Museums do not preserve whole stories. They preserve what the sea chose to return. Luxury makes the silence sharper. Velvet-lined trunks, ivory combs, silk gowns folded for new lives, all reminders that permanence was intended. Yet behind glass, they remind us instead of impermanence. They are tokens of absence, luxury items divorced from the lives they were meant to accompany. Why do these fragments draw us so deeply? Perhaps because they suggest stories just out of reach. A spoon whispers of meals never eaten. A candlestick hints at gatherings never held. A decanter clouded with salt tells of toasts never made. And still, the museums cannot close the ledger. They display fragments, catalog them, polish them under lights. But the names are missing, the records incomplete, the pages still blurred. What remains behind glass is not closure. It is memory suspended, waiting, unfinished. The wrecks of the Channel Islands, were not remembered only in ledgers and salvage. They lived on in stories, told in newspapers, whispered in fishing villages, and retold at tables in San Francisco long after the ships themselves were gone. The Winfield Scott became a favorite subject. Reporters described the wreck in 1853 as if it were a parable. Passengers saved, possessions lost, and trunks scattered across Anacapa's shore. The papers published lists of survivors, but cargo was described only as assorted goods. Families searching the columns for specific names found silence. What reached readers was not fact, but fragments. Later retellings added detail that may never have been true. Trunks full of gold coins, candlesticks gleaming in kelp, passengers standing on cliffs, watching their wealth sink just offshore. Was it memory or imagination filling the gaps? The Golden Horn in 1869 burned so brightly that its glow was seen from the mainland. Newspapers called it a pyre on the water. Stories spread quickly of locked trunks found later, of decanters pulled from tide pools, of fine porcelain fused into strange shapes by fire. Some accounts said the spoons from that voyage bore initials that no one could read. Others insisted no initials were found at all. The stories contradicted each other, but they kept the wreck alive in memory. On San Miguel, the discovery of a chest filled with silver spoons in the 1930s became legend of its own. Locals retold it as proof of the sea's strange generosity. Luxury returned without owners. Children grew up hearing about the spoons wrapped in linen, imagining the family who had packed them. With each retelling, the chest shifted slightly in detail. Some said it was found after a great storm, others that it was uncovered by ranchers moving cattle. What mattered was not precision, but the echo of mystery, spoons with no story. The five senses made these stories vivid in retelling. The glow of the Golden Horn seen against a dark horizon, the crash of timbers breaking on the devil's jaw, the sour smell of salt clinging to trunks pulled ashore, the quiet of bones uncovered in dunes, the feel of porcelain shards picked up by curious hands. Luxury sharpened the folklore, velvet trunks swollen by seawater, crystal decanters clouded with haze, silver candlesticks dulled but intact. These objects were repeated in story after story, their survival becoming more dramatic with each telling. They were no longer cargo, they were symbols of lives interrupted. Why do people retell these wrecks? Perhaps because unfinished stories demand to be repeated. Each silence in the record is filled with speculation, each fragment turned into narrative. Over time, the lines between fact and myth blur. Did a fisherman really say the locked trunks of the Golden Horn should never be opened? Did the spoons of San Miguel truly carry initials? We cannot know, but the stories are told as if they did. The Channel Islands became theaters for these retellings. On beaches, at ranch houses, in harbor taverns, the same fragments appeared again and again. A spoon, a candlestick, a decanter, a chest. Each story left the ledger open, inviting new listeners to imagine what had been erased. And so the wrecks survived, not in certainty, but in echoes. The Pacific coast of California became a corridor of ambition in the mid-1800s. Ships steamed north from Panama after the discovery of gold in 1848, their decks crowded with passengers and their holds heavy with cargo bound for San Francisco. Between Point Conception and the Golden Gate, the most dangerous stretch lay near the Channel Islands. Reefs off Anacapa and Santa Cruz claimed vessels like the Winfield Scott in 1853. Fires destroyed ships offshore, including the Golden Horn in 1869. The Santa Rosa and the Comet followed, each leaving wreckage on beaches, but not enough to complete their stories. Official ledgers name them, yet the names of those who lost their possessions remain silent. The sea kept more than hulls. It swallowed ledgers that should have reached San Francisco intact. Cargo manifests stopped mid-line. Journals from captains and clerks trailed into nothing. Sometimes the ocean surrendered fragments. A vellum page feathered into blur, a passenger list with ink dissolved, but never the whole record. Luxury sharpened the silence. Velvet-lined trunks floated in kelp beds, recovered swollen shut, their fittings green with corrosion. Porcelain imported from Asia shattered into tide pools, fragments later picked up by curious hands. Silver spoons wrapped in linen surfaced on San Miguel, but the names of their owners never did. Crystal decanters, once meant for tables in San Francisco, were found clouded with salt, their corks gone. Why did the sea return these fragments, but not the full stories? Was it chance, or does the ocean keep its own archive, deciding what to reveal and what to erase? Divers who explore wreck sites describe the same experience. Iron ribs of ships lie half buried in sand, boilers collapsed, timbers scattered. The water is quiet, almost too quiet, broken only by the hiss of air bubbles. In that silence, every object seems deliberate. A porcelain plate resting on a ledge, a spoon caught in a crevice, a trunk wedged into reef. These are the sea's ledgers, kept in order no human wrote. The Channel Islands became keepers of these ledgers. Santa Cruz holds fittings from vessels burned offshore. Santa Rosa has produced bones from dunes, some human, some animal, weathered together into pale fragments. Anacapa's Devil's Jaw still hides pieces of the Winfield Scott, iron encrusted, porcelain dulled, records unfinished. The sea kept stories families were never told, passengers who vanished without belongings, merchants who lost fortunes without explanation, captains whose final log entries never reached the mainland. The ocean's silence filled the gaps left in ledgers and journals, and yet the fragments it does return keep the mystery open. A candlestick dulled by sand still suggests the table it once adorned. A spoon bent by fire raises questions about whose meal it was meant for. A trunk swollen shut whispers of letters or diaries still sealed inside. What else lies beneath the waves, sealed in silt, out of reach? Could there be complete journals, intact trunks, or untouched cargo still hidden, waiting for another storm or diver to lift them back into daylight? Or has the ocean kept the most decisive answers for itself? The sea has preserved wrecks for more than a century, but what it keeps and what it chooses to give back ensures that the ledger of California's wrecks remains unfinished. From the 1840s to the 1890s, California's Pacific coast became one long ledger of wrecks. More than 2,000 vessels ended their voyages here, many within sight of shore. The record books list their names: the Winfield Scott, the Golden Horn, the Santa Rosa, the Comet. But what matters is not only the names we know, it is the silences that follow them. Ledgers end mid-line, ink feathered into blur. Cargo manifests stop with the word assorted, never more specific. Captains' journals break off on ordinary sentences, never continuing. Families waited in San Francisco for trunks that never arrived, for notices that said only missing, for objects that told them nothing. The fragments that survive sharpen this absence. Velvet trunks swollen shut, locked and unopened. Silver spoons wrapped in linen, initials worn away by salt. Crystal decanters clouded with haze, washed into tide pools. Porcelain plates fractured, but gleaming under waves. Each one is evidence. Each one is also a question. Luxury objects survive while the people who carried them do not. That is the cruel paradox of these wrecks. A candlestick dulled by sand can be displayed in a museum. The family it was meant for is remembered only as passengers, presumed lost. A trunk swollen with seawater may still hold letters or ledgers, but they are fused into silence. The sea kept them closed. What does the ocean decide to return, and what does it keep? Why do some trunks wash ashore locked, while others dissolve into fragments? Why are spoons found in sand, but journals vanish completely? The questions linger because the answers remain sealed. The Channel Islands themselves are the truest ledger. Their beaches scatter porcelain shards. Their reefs hold iron and brass. Their dunes sometimes uncover bones. They are archives written in fragments, kept by waves instead of ink. And like any ledger, they are unfinished. Every wreck leaves us with silence heavier than cargo. And silence, unlike cloth or porcelain, cannot be salvaged. So the ledger of California's shipwrecks remains open. Do you think the sea still holds complete stories? Journals intact, trunks unopened, names still legible on paper waiting beneath the silt? Or has the ocean already erased the evidence, leaving only fragments to haunt us? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Like this video if the silence of these wrecks stayed with you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next page of history's ledger. Because next, we turn from the silence of the sea to the silence of treaties. The next video, the hidden history of how the US took Mexico's land. This is the story of boundaries drawn in ink, promises broken, and names erased from maps. The ledger of nations is no more complete than the ledgers of ships. The sea kept its fragments, the land kept its silences, and the ledger turns again.